Tonight, Governor Gretchen Whitmer will be delivering her third State of the State address, but it's going to be a bit different this year as she will not be doing it in front of some of the lawmakers. But to talk about that and all things politics, let's go ahead and bring in our favorite professor, Professor Dave Dulio of Political Science and the Director for the Center for Civic Engagement over at Oakland University. Great to have you with us again, Professor.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I would anticipate tonight the governor's address, really nothing new is going to come out of it.
I would probably agree with that. I think that we've seen both the governor and the legislature in the last couple of weeks lay out some plans for COVID relief, but given that that is what is rightly so dominating our world, right? That I would be surprised if she veered terribly far off of that path.
Seems like we've forgotten all about the roads. You take something that was such, really a cornerstone of her campaign, and then you throw in a pandemic and it just goes away. We forgot about the roads.
I mean, the best laid plans can get tossed out the window pretty quick, and that's what we saw happen. I read this morning that the governor has said that she hasn't forgotten about the roads, and I believe that, right? I mean, it just there are bigger fish to fry at the moment, I think.
Yeah, and with that, hopefully at some point in time, we're going to start to see the two political parties come together. I will say, no surprise, of course, with Donald Trump and the, his impeachment, we knew that the Republicans were not going to vote to get this passed. So, you're looking at that and some people do wonder, why did you even go with it? But I think the bigger thing to come out of this is really the future of the Republican Party. How are they going to go forward from this point on?
I think that's a great question. In terms of impeachment, I think that if there were going to be Republicans who voted to, let's use the word convict, right? Even though we're not talking about a real trial here. We're not talking about a judicial exercise. Impeachment is a political exercise, right? So I think we don't do ourselves any favors when we use terms that were more familiar to us when we are thinking about a judicial activity, right? But having said that, that's the parlance, so we can use it, right? But if Republicans were going to vote to convict Donald Trump, I think it would have been immediately after January 6th. The further we get from that, I think the less likely that outcome becomes. I also think it becomes more likely, to your point, that more in the public look at it and go, okay, he's out of office. What are we doing here? We need to get to getting people vaccinated. We need to get to the president's next round of COVID relief package, right? It just becomes, I think, a more difficult sell to a lot of people the further away we get.
Yeah, because you do almost understand it in those days right after. And it is going to be interesting to see if the Democrats continue to push the issue and talk about this issue, if it is going to alienate some members of the public for just what you mentioned. We're in the middle of the pandemic. He's out of office. And I think the surprising thing, we haven't heard from Trump since he left office.
Right. Well, great. So much in there to unpack, right? And I think you make so many good points. Let's start with that. I think Twitter, frankly, did Republicans a big favor by eliminating him from that platform. Nobody hears from him now, right? So, and what was, you could make a strong case that the Trump churn on a daily basis was really what made our politics for so many years, right? Without that, now Trump is still an issue, no doubt about it. And Democrats are going to continue to make him an issue because it works, right? In terms of whether or not they're alienating anybody, frankly, the way we've been going, even in the first, 7 days of the Biden administration, I don't see a whole lot of coming together. I see a whole lot of continued polarization. And let's be honest about it, Democrats aren't going to worry about Republicans as long as they've got enough independents with them to have a sort of a governing majority, right? If they've got enough Democrats and independents on their side, they'll forget about the Republicans.
I would like to get your thoughts on the use of the executive order. You know, obviously we've seen it used a lot here in the state of Michigan, but we've also are now seeing it with Biden. He made quite the show of some of his executive orders. And you kind of wonder, when it comes to the executive orders, what about the process? What about the process of, you know, having a separation of these branches of government?
Right. I'm so glad you asked about that, because this is something that is a pet peeve of mine, right? And it really has to do with hypocrisy. And no surprise here, right? Hypocrisy abounds when we talk about politics. But both sides need to figure out what they really think about executive power, right? When one party is in control and has the governor's mansion or the presidency, they don't see it as a problem. As soon as the other side gets it, it's the worst thing, right? It's, oh my gosh, how can the president do this? How can the governor do this? It's all executive. Well, a month ago, it was a different story, right? At the federal level. So Democrats are now all about Joe Biden using executive power when they absolutely hated it when Donald Trump did it, right? So it's not so much about the power, it's about the policies, right? And to your question, right, these executive orders at the federal level, they are written solely by White House staff, well, obviously with input from the president and his team, but that is a purely executive function that has very little check in terms of the wording of those orders. Now, the orders at the federal level are much more limited in scope because they can't contradict current law. And in fact, we even saw it, the other day, one of those executive orders get stopped by a court. So that's also nothing new, right? President Trump saw a number of his executive orders challenged and thrown out in court over his 4 years in office. And Joe Biden is finding that right now.
So what is the future of our politics? You have the pulse on the younger generation. What are they saying right now?
Well, I think the students that I come in contact with are a lot like everybody else, right? They just want it to work. They want it to be effective and efficient government that solves problems that the country's facing. And nobody likes the bitter partisanship, the polarization, the bickering, the gridlock. But frankly, the way the start of the Biden administration doesn't give me a whole lot of hope that we're going to break that logjam anytime soon.
He was supposed to be the one to bring the country together and to bring the two sides together, because one thing about Biden, he's been in this system long enough to know how it works.
Absolutely.
So why isn't he doing it?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I would love to be a fly on the wall in the Oval Office or the Cabinet Room when those meetings are taking place to really know what the calculus is. I think you're exactly right. For not just his inaugural speech, but he promised throughout the campaign to be the one to bring the country together, right, and to have this unity. Well, and just yesterday I read that some of his statements are backing off that a little bit, right, where he said something to the effect of, well, you can have unity even if you've got a vote in Congress that falls along partisan lines. Well, that seems like a backtrack to me, and that's concerning, because really I think the only way you really solve problems and give people a real confidence in what the government is doing is to have even just a little bit of bipartisanship and cooperation, and certainly that's a two-way street, right? But it's a two-way street. Both sides have to figure out that, okay, we might have to give up a little bit on our ideal policy position here. And until they do that, we're not going to get the kind of outcomes that I think people really want.
One thing that I thought about when they were making such a show out of him signing some of the executive orders, because you do know that like this is setting the tone for his first 100 days. But what I was thinking too was when they were talking about reversal, 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 I'm thinking how much of our money, our tax dollars, has now been wasted. And there's a way to go about these things that you don't have to make them so public. But really, at the end of the day, and the way they're throwing around these terms about billions and trillions, and they're putting it wrapped in the coronavirus relief, we need to remember when you say the federal versus the state, it's all taxpayer money.
Right. It's all the viewers and listeners' money that are tuned into the megacast. It really is. You have to wonder, and I will say that they make because they make these things public and do quite a bit of publicity around them. I actually think that's a good thing because it's transparency. It lets us know. And lets us ask the questions that you just did, right? How much money are we wasting now, or have we wasted, or are we going to waste with this pivot from one policy to another?
So looking ahead, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but anything we should be looking out for in with Trump, how long before he reemerges?
I think it's a fabulous question, right? I don't know how he reemerges, right? I mean, and to some extent that's up to the press. If they cover him, he'll reemerge, right? If they put a bank of cameras out in front of Mar-a-Lago, I bet you he comes out. But if they don't, he doesn't have a platform, right? I think a couple things to watch out for. At the federal level, right, we've got to watch how the next relief package, which I think could actually get some bipartisan agreement if there's a little bit of give on each side, right? Wouldn't that be nice, is to have something that goes back about a year when that first big relief package passed with overwhelming majority in the House and the Senate. That would be a great way to have to start 2021 from a political perspective. I'm not sure that's going to happen. It looks more and more likely that the Democrats in the House and the Senate will use a tool called budget reconciliation that will let them move this thing without much, if any, Republican support. I'd also say, too, it'll be interesting to watch how the Senate handles impeachment. Once they start, the rules, as I understand them, are that they have they can't do anything else but impeachment. So, and that's another factor, right? If that's how it goes, how many people start asking the question, okay, you're doing this to what end? What about all the other things that you said you were going to do? When are we going to get to those?
Yeah, the things that matter to us now. It's going to be interesting to see if Trump is waiting for the outcome of the impeachment before he steps in front of the cameras again.
That's a great point. Very possible. Yeah.
About 20 seconds here left with you, Professor. Tell us anything coming up with the Center for Civic Engagement. I know you had one this past week. Anything on the agenda?
Yeah, in a couple of weeks, we're going to get to a reprisal of our office hours series where we feature faculty from Oakland University, and they take questions from folks who tune in to a virtual event.
Well, thank you again. And again, people can find that online because you guys have a great staff over there at Oakland University. We're lucky to have you here in our backyard. Professor Dave Dulio with us here on the MegaCast. He's the professor of political science and the director for the Center for Civic Engagement over at Oakland University.